Good morning. I'm Julia Shola, the Industry Relations Manager at PWSA. Thanks for joining us for our second session of our four-part business development series. Our first session was 2 weeks ago on May 11th, and our Sustainability Manager, James Stitt, presented all things stormwater. So we do have a recording of that session if you're interested in watching. If you head to pgh2o.com and click on our developers, contractors, and vendors menu, you'll see a link there to our 2022 Business Development Series webpage. And that's where we'll be hosting all of our recordings and our presentations. So you can check back anytime if you're unable to attend a session or if there's something that was of interest to you that you want to go back and check on. Again, that's at pgh2o.com under developers, contractors, and vendors. Today, we're going to talk about permitting, and specifically, we're going to do a deep dive into our development permits, as well as our new permitting system, CityGrows. We know how confusing the development permit process is in Pittsburgh, and we want to make our processes as simplified as possible. So we made significant changes at the beginning of 2022, and we'll talk about some of those today as well. So we have Jordan Treaster, who's our development coordinator, and he's going to present on all of our different types of permits and go into detail about the requirements of the development permit. And I'll jump back on at the end and talk through CityGrows. We do want you to leave with all of your questions answered, so feel free to jump in at any time during the presentation. You can raise your hand or jump in the chat, and we'll answer your questions throughout. But there will be time at the end for Q&A as well. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jordan.
Yeah, thanks for joining, everyone. Thanks, Julie, for the introduction. We can move on to the agenda. As Julie mentioned, we'll be going over our development permits, everything related to the development permit, the developer's manual. We'll provide you with some resources to help you through the process and maybe some additional resources that you can reach out to, not specifically to PWSA. And then Julie will finish with some an introduction to CityGrows and go through that process as well. The City of Pittsburgh, the PWSA does not actually extend all water and sewer to the city boundary. In blue, you can kind of see where we supply water and sewer to, and the hashed lines is where we only service for a sewer. Also in Millville, we provide water but not sewer. So it's a misconception that PWSA handles all water and sewer for the city of Pittsburgh. It's important to know where your project is for that water and sewer connection and determine what utility you have to go through for service. At PWSA, we offer a lot of permits. We have a specific tab on our website that handles all of our permitting, and we'll go into we'll give a brief overview of what each permit is. The operations permit, it kind of handles all of the hydrant flow tests. If you need a fire hydrant meter, a water line shut permit, that would be found on our operations permit. It's also in our CityGrows. There's more details on how to access that on our website, and that's where you would go for a specific operations permit like that. Also, we have a residential permit. This is our most standard permit for a single family house on one lot. It's sometimes confused with the development permit. You can certainly reach out to us and we can kind of guide you along to determine if your project needs the residential permit or it meets the development permit requirements. We make this very easy to attain. You don't need to submit tap-in plans, go through the long, complex process of a development permit, but you do need to coordinate all of the detail requirements and work with PWSA to inspect the actual connections for the residential permit. Tap terminations, whenever a demolished building happens and you're terminating all of the taps to the building, you'll need to complete the requirements for the tap termination. We have since merged that into our development permit, but it's a simplified process if you're not rebuilding or renovating any buildings and you're just simply making those tap terminations. We also have a review for any DOMI approvals. If you are vacating a street and you need a street vacation or an encroachment permit, We work with DOMI to review if we have any infrastructure in the area of your project, and we'll determine if any action needs to be done with PWSA to relocate or and determine if any impacts are done to our infrastructure. Also, we have a land ops permit. This is through PL&I, but PWSA has input on what utility infrastructure impacts happen in the project, and more details on that can be found on our website as well. All of these are through our CityGrows permitting portal, except for DOMI approvals, which should be uploaded shortly. So all of this is simplified in our new portal. Joy will discuss at the end. Jumping into development permits, it's one of our most complicated. It might be our most complicated permit that we offer at PWSA. It's different than a residential permit, as in anything greater than a single family house is required to come through the development permit process. Also, if you're putting in a fire system, that automatically puts you into a development permit, even if it is a single family house. If you have subdivision lots, if you're going from 2 parcels to 4 parcels, that kicks you into a development permit. If you're also proposing more than 2 homes, so if you have a phased development, so you're developing 3 single family houses, we count that as 3 individual parcels being developed, so that constitutes a development permit. We want to review what you're doing, how many houses you're building, or it doesn't have to be houses, it can be apartment buildings or something larger than just a standard residential permit. Also for tap terminations, if there's more than 2 taps terminated, we want to review where those taps are, what you're doing, automatically kicks you into a development permit. And similarly, the taps on additional lots to be terminated. We also have additional processes within the development permit. This is a step further once we determine what the project scope is. If you need a private construction of public facilities, this is for any extension or relocation of PWSA facilities to service your property. This is all done privately. You construct it privately. You're responsible for the building and constructing of the facilities, but upon completion of the project, you're dedicating it back to PWSA for maintenance and ownership of the lines. This comes with a developer's agreement. It details who owns the infrastructure, what you're responsible for as the developer during the private construction, and ultimately transitions the ownership to us upon completion. It's a lengthy process, but in some instances it's necessary within the development permit. Just jumping right into the development permit, we have a development permit process overview on our website. If you're not familiar with our requirements, I typically refer you to this overview to kind of give you an idea of what we require and a step-by-step guide of what happens during the development permit. The first step is a pre-development meeting with us, and we also will have some engineering staff I'll talk about in a little bit on that meeting, and we can talk through your project there. Also, we have a water and sewer availability letter request. This is a requirement. You get a GIS printout of the map of your parcel. You can see what kind of infrastructure you have available to you, what size lines they are, and so forth. Step 3, after those 2 are completed, you begin submitting your application to us. Step 4 would be the sewage facilities planning module. It's a DEP regulation. I'll talk about that more in a little bit and whether your project may or may not need one. And then step 5 would be your water and sewer tap-in plan, your actual drawings of the property and your project, and our review of them, and then issuance after that. So all of this information is governed by the developer's manual. We have had several updates to the developer's manual recently. It's basically outlines all of the rules and regulations for development projects in our service area. It's referenced in our tariff. It's a PUC requirement. It's governed by the board, our board, and it has to be approved. It details everything that relates to a development project, what you're required to do, and how we review your project essentially. There's details in there. It's pretty extensive on how to submit development projects to us, what we're looking for. We also provide examples of projects that we see frequently in the developer's manual. I believe in 2021 or 2020, we started the roundtable event in the spring. This is an opportunity. We hold a similar situation to this where we present to you our proposed updates of the developer's manual, and you can provide feedback on what you would like to see, and we take into consideration everything that's going on. We like to do this annually because we're a changing environment, and it's important to keep this updated with as our processes change, and we continue to have those roundtable events now and in the future to gain feedback from business owners and developers like yourselves. Jumping back to the overview, like I said, the step one would be the pre-development meeting. This project may not be necessarily new to you, but it is to us, which is why we require the pre-development meeting as the very first step in the development permit process. Like I said, we have our engineering staff on the call, as well as your own engineering staff or contractor or plumber. We recommend having an owner on that can provide a detailed scope of the project, and we can talk through what all is going to be required, whether it needs to go through the development permit process one, or what kind of processes you're looking at within the development permit. We have an agenda online that you can look at. It pretty much provides what the discussion will be covered as far as what your existing proposed flows are, and then what your water, sewer, and storm connections will be. We'll look at our GIS map, show you more interactively than a printout map of our infrastructure. We also discuss requirements. If you need a hydrant flow test, if you need CCTV, or most importantly, if you need a sewage facility planning module. This is beneficial to not only us to figure out what the project scope is, but to you as well to understand what we're going to require going forward. We like to have this as step one, just so we're all on the same page whenever you're ready to submit your application. We do require it for all development projects. I issue meeting minutes at the end of the pre-development meeting, which is a requirement for CityGrows to be uploaded to start your application. We want to make sure that we're at least aware of the development project and we've had some input. We understand the scope before you begin submitting items to us that we're unfamiliar with. Step two, the water and sewer availability letter. This can be done prior to step one. It doesn't necessarily need to be step two. It's almost encouraged to be before the pre-development meeting. It's also found on our development permits page, and it has migrated to CityGrows. It essentially confirms water and sewer service. Here you'll receive a GIS map from one of our engineering permitting technicians that shows what kind of infrastructure you have in the area and what you have available to you. It's just a very good tool to figure out what's going on around your property. Maybe you have a sewer line or a water line that may be running through your property, or some instances that you're unaware of. So it's definitely beneficial to complete this before you. And it is a requirement that you complete it. And it's a $40 fee. All of that can be paid through our CityGrows. So you did your pre-development meeting, you have your utility water and sewer availability letter, and now you're able to begin submitting actual items for our review. Julie will detail the initial review in CityGrows and kind of give you an overview of what you see whenever you enter that portal. But what we discuss will be essentially determining existing flows of your property. We do allow you to estimate your existing flows through our developer's manual. On the right, you can see a snapshot of what you will see in the developer's manual as far as estimating your existing and proposed flows. We allow you to claim credit for an existing use up to 15 years ago to help you get over the threshold of the sewage facilities planning module, which I'll discuss a little later. It's important to note that existing flows should be calculated with peak daily flow gallons per day. In some instances where you can't prove that an existing a use isn't estimated using our developer's manual, you are able to contact customer service and obtain historical records. I believe they require that the owner of the property contacts them and they will provide you that information. It's important to calculate the proposed flows. We ask that's a requirement. We ask that you calculate the proposed flows similarly to how you determine your existing flows. So what the existing lot is producing and what you're proposing with your new development. It can also be estimated through the developer's manual. You'll be required to submit documentation. There are some instances where a developer's manual is a little vague in some situations, so there's definitely an opportunity to for negotiating between you and our engineering staff when reviewing proposed flows. That will be all decided in the initial review of your development permit. And essentially what we're trying to do is calculate the net flow, how much flow you're producing, how much flow was on the lot, and then we'll reach a number that's acceptable to you and us for the net flow. All of that is important because of the sewage facilities planning module. This is a DEP regulation, the Pennsylvania Sewage Facilities Act. It essentially mandates all of the municipalities in Pennsylvania to have an official sewage facilities plan. The city of Pittsburgh was enacted May 15th, 1972, and we must abide by that. It essentially addresses all the existing sewage in the area, and its main goal is to regulate the land development in the service area. DEP has a say in how large we can grow in a year. It wants to manage all of the growth and pretty much determine how much flow and sanitary flow we accumulate and really wants to regulate how much we grow. On the right, you'll see a planning diagram that our engineering staff developed to kind of help developers understand if their project meets the planning threshold. The most common trigger for a sewage facilities planning module is excess flow. If your flow is greater than 800 gallons per day for new project flows, you're going to be required to have a planning module. This is where the existing flows and proposed flows are important to figure out early in the process. Also, if you subdivide a lot, if you created a lot that wasn't there before that May 15th date, you're going to be required to have a planning module. Since it's a long process, it's 3 to 6 months, we will discuss in the pre-development meeting just so everybody's aware of the time frame. We understand the schedules are important to you, but a planning module we must abide by. So we try to determine whether this is required early on in the process. It's probably the most complicated process within our development permit because we can't issue the development permit until you receive a planning module if it's a requirement. I do like to note that PWSA is just a collector system. Alcosan has a say in it. You need signatures from Alcosan, the city, and ultimately DEP to review the planning module whenever your project needs one. In step 5, after you completed your water and sewer use review, determine if you need a planning module, and we go through that process. You can begin uploading your actual drawings. We call them tap-in plans of your project. Tap-in plans are required for any development that's proposing new taps. If they're upsizing taps, increasing flow to an existing tap, we require a tap-in plan. We have guidelines on our website, shows standards and details. Also in the developer's manual, there's a guide on how to submit the tap-in plans to us. We do update them frequently. I'd also like to note that your tap-in plans must be signed by a Pennsylvania certified engineer. It's a PUC requirement that we abide by that pretty much states how we accept tap-in plans and what signatures look like. So we do have that as a requirement. CCTV, if you're creating any new tap for sanitary, sewer or storm, we require CCTV. We want to make sure that the sewer line is able to handle your flow. Number one, if there's an issue with our sewer line, we will go out and fix the pipe before you begin your tap-in plan and get approval, and you're making that connection to a faulty line. Also, we have a new approval block. We just updated our website at the end of March. So we do continually update our standards and details, but if you find that you're using old details and you want to check, you'll have an engineering reviewer during the development permit process that you can reach out to and ask and make sure that they're the most updated details. If you completed a previous tap-in plan and you're making a revision to a previously approved tap plan, we do ask that you red cloud any revisions. There's a process in CityGrows that you will be able to submit revisions for review. So you finally got approval for the tap-in plans. After we get signatures from our engineering staff and our operations staff, PWSA customer service will end up issuing the permit after those approvals come through. When you receive your issued permit, you will begin to you will have a section that details how you are to coordinate with PWSA operations team to make the water connection and the meter installation. For water service, PWSA makes the physical connection to our water main, but the developer is responsible for the excavation and running the actual service lateral to the main. Also, PWSA will set the meter. The developer purchases the meter from PWSA, but PWSA operations team will ultimately set it in place. More information can be found on our website as far as who to contact for meters and installation, but you will also receive a name and number on your issued letter upon approval for the permit. Sewer connections are a little bit different. PWSA ultimately only has jurisdiction over the PWSA main and the actual Y to the main. The contractor is responsible to excavate the entire way and actually make the connection to the sewer main. The applicant, whenever they are ready for a sewer connection, will reach out to PWSA and we will send an inspector out whenever you're performing the work, and make sure that everything goes according to plan whenever you make that sewer connection to our line. The sewer laterals are owned by the developer, but the Allegheny County Health Department Planning Division actually has jurisdiction over the sewer lateral. In addition to the PWSA inspector, you also need to coordinate with the Allegheny County Health Department to have an inspection with them of the sewer lateral before completing all the backfill. If you haven't seen our updated fee schedule, we have issued our 2022 fee schedule. It's significantly different than it used to be. We used to be charging tapping fees based on how much flow you're creating to a project. Now the fees are calculated on how complex the review is and how difficult of a project it is. You can see that the development permit costs about $740 for the planning review and the actual tap plan review. We determine what's going to be required for your project early on in the process. You'll pay to have it move forward in the permitting process as for the review. We also, new in 2022, allow for an expedited review. For an additional fee, we do get back to you within 15 days upon payment for an expedited review. We do ask for justification on why you need an expedited review. We do have limited services, so we want to make sure that we are able to complete all of our reviews, not only expedited, in a timely manner. Also, the meter and connection fees, this will be paid at the end of your permit review process. Whenever we agree on the tap-in plans and they're able to be signed and sizings reviewed and you're ready for that connection, we will require payment before issuance. If you are familiar with previous fees, you'll notice that most of them have decreased actually for the connection and meter fees. So it was really a large overhaul of the previous fee system and fee schedule to where we are at now. Some additional resources that PWSA has available. We do have a map and records request for every project, for every parcel in our service area. We provide, if you make the request, we'll review your parcel number and make sure that we actually have historical records before payment. And then we'll provide you essentially everything that we have related to your parcel. You'll receive historical records, drill sheets, calc books, and any drawings that we have available for your lot. As I mentioned before, the water and sewer availability letter. It's a separate application and fee, but it is a requirement of the development permit. Also, if you need a fire hydrant flow test, it's also found on our website. Everything is through CityGrows. And finally, the agency resources. We do have contacts at each individual place where it might be beneficial to you for your permit. And you can find representatives for each of those areas on our website under that agency resources tab. And new in 2022, we now have a United Language Group. We work with them to provide language assistance. If there's a language barrier that we are unable to help, we can have United Language Group come in and help assist with that barrier. And that wraps up the beginning portion of our presentation related to the development permit. At this point, I'll take any questions if you have them related to the development permit as a whole, or we can continue with Jolie's portion of the CityGrows permitting software. She will give an overview of our entire new permitting portal.
That was a lot of information about the development permit, but everything that Jordan just went through does live on our website. We did, I think that was in 2020 that we redid our whole website and just added a ton of information that was non-existent before. So you can always go back and reference that as well. Okay, if there's no questions, we'll move on to the CityGrows portion, which Jordan, I'll share my screen here. Okay, can you see the presentation? So CityGrows permitting software is a web application that we just launched. It was in November of 2021. And we started with our simpler permits with operations and residential, and those more over-the-counter permits. And recently in January of 2022, we launched the development permit. And we're still going through some growing pains with that, but we do think it's a better process than the e-builder process we were using previously. We do want to get the land operations and DOMI approvals into CityGrows soon. We've been working on that, as Jordan had mentioned earlier in the presentation. So currently those still run through eBuilder and it's through email, but eventually they'll be in CityGrows as well. For anybody that has projects in the process, they'll remain in eBuilder until completion, just because there's the fees are involved and whatnot, and we don't want to have to make it more complicated than it needs to be. So new projects you'll start in CityGrows, but old ones will just remain in eBuilder until they're completed. And with CityGrows, we are able to take credit card payments, which we weren't before. It was all done by check. So throughout the CityGrows process, you'll have two fees typically. One is the application fee at the beginning of the process. And your application fee for a development permit will vary based on those processes that Jordan discussed, which we'll get into more detail later. And then you'll have the meter and connection fees. So you can pay by credit card, or you can still pay by check. You can send it to the office at 1200 Penn, and we'll finish your permit once we receive that check. But just know that we are still experiencing delays with the checks. We only get mail a couple times a week, and we're not 100% back in the office yet. So the processing of those checks are just a little bit delayed. So credit card is the best way to keep your permit moving through the process. Okay, so when you're starting your development permit in CityGrows, this is the screen you'll see. Just go back a step. You do need to create a login to use CityGrows, and it's just your name and your email address. We don't really need more information than that. So once you have your login, you'll have your own dashboard and be able to see all of the different permits you've submitted and where they're at in the process. But if you're starting a development permit for the first time, this is the screen you'll see. It kind of gives you an estimated cost breakdown, and this is based on actual permits that have been completed and the time that it takes to get through the process. And you'll see the different steps. What is the applicant's responsibility? What's PWSA's responsibility? So when you're ready, you just, start your application. And once you're in the system and you start your application, this is the first screen you'll see. It's the initial application. And this is where we have some instructions here that explain sort of what the sewage facilities planning module is, where our developer's manual is, the city code of ordinances, different fees and whatnot. So easy to access information right here in your application. So here we will also collect developer information, the engineering consultant contact info, the account holder info, and this is what our engineering team and customer service team needs to complete your permit at the end. Yeah, so you'll also add in your flow information here. So as Jordan was talking about, once you determine what your flows are going to be and your existing flows, will come in here and add that information. And this is really what our engineering team is going to use to determine if you need a sewage facilities planning module. They'll also use this information to determine if you need a tap-in plan, which 80%, no, we'll say 90% of the time you need a tap-in plan. But this initial application, if you're familiar with our former process, it takes place of the water and sewer use application. We don't require that application any longer. We do ask that you upload calculations that support your flow numbers, but you don't have an extra application any longer. It's just within this initial application. And, a good thing to note is the DEP requires a TAP allocation letter that is submitted with your planning module submission to them. So that the allocation letter is provided in this initial application review. I think we provided it after the water and sewer use application review previously. So we do provide that early on in the process. So after the initial application review, you'll see over here on the left-hand side, kind of gives you a rundown of the different steps throughout the process, if the applicant's responsible, if PWSA is responsible, and just kind of moves you through the process. And that like gives you the status of where you are. So after the initial application is submitted, we have this initial application review and selection of required processes. And this is where our engineering team takes a look at your application and decides what additional sub-processes are required. And once they select those in step 2, you'll see additional requirements will pop up just above your steps here. So it'll be in between your name and steps. And you'll also get an email notification of this. So we'll say, I forget the exact language, but just telling you that you have an additional sub-process to complete. And so now once those are triggered, you can't complete your development permit until your sub-processes are completed. And this is where the applicant has to come in and start those sub-process. You'll see before it says, gives you the number that the tap-in plan review is, it'll just say start. So you'll click start and then you can upload your tap-in plans. And then same with the planning modules, they start. But once you start that, that'll give our team a notification to come in and take a deeper look at the most limited capacity sewer requirement that we have. Well, you might have to do some flow monitoring or some flow depth measurements. So we'll take that first step for the planning module review, but the applicant does have to start that process. And you do get a lot of email notifications with CityGrows, but not every, as the steps advance, you might not get an email. So just come in and check every so often if you haven't heard from us. There might be something in your court, but let's see if I want to move on yet. Okay, so let me go back. Again, once you get through these sub-processes, so the tap-in plan review is just a back and forth with our engineer. We know they take a look at what you've submitted and provide comments, and they'll provide a PDF red line of things you need to change in your next submittal. And that goes back and forth until they feel comfortable with the tap-in plans. And then we send it over to our operations division and they approve as well. And then that process is complete and we'll go into, the DEP planning module review is similar, just a back and forth until the engineers are comfortable with your submittal. And then we provide a letter at the end that you submit to the as Jordan mentioned, to Alcosan, then to city, then the DEP. And then you send that back to PWSA once all those signatures are gathered. But the DEP SFPM review process ends when we provide that first letter to you before it goes to Alcosan or any other agencies. And so seeing the steps over here on the left-hand side, you'll see that it'll sit, we actually have a new step in here that's not shown on the screenshot. It's called verification of completed reviews. And that's a step that the applicant's responsible for. You just click in there once your sub-processes are completed, and that triggers to your reviewer that we're ready to move on and complete the permit. Previously, it was just like sitting in this step 5 in our engineers' dashboards and was kind of confusing to them. So we changed that just a little bit a few weeks ago. But they'll come in and put in the number of meters that you're getting, the number of taps, if there's any terminations. And so that information will pass on to our operations team when they're out in the field doing your inspections. And that's where you'll pay the connection and meter fees. And then this step number 7, which is actually step number 8, is where you'll upload that completed DEP planning module that has all the signatures on it. So your permit could sit in this step, for a couple of months because, you're waiting for the DEP to respond to you. So once you upload that document, we're allowed to issue your permit. We'll move on, and we'll get signatures on the drawings and on your permit document. So this is the actual permit that's issued at the end from CityGrows. You can download it anytime. It just will live in your dashboard. Permits are good for 5 years once they're issued. So if you can pay, it's best to do that, when your permit's done. So then you have 5 years to get your project started. If you leave it sit and not pay the fees, it expires in 6 months. And the reason for that is because, as Jordan mentioned, the DEP regulates the number of taps that we're permitted to issue each year. So we don't hold taps for anybody. If your project's not moving forward, we're gonna, pass those taps along to somebody else. So, like I said, best to pay and have your permit than have it expire and you have to start all over again. So again, this is what the permit document looks like. It gives our customer service and operations all the information they need. But what's important to you as the applicant or project owner is this procedure block. It shows you who to call to get an inspection or schedule your meter installation or anything like that. So make sure that you're doing that. A lot of times, especially with terminations or just sewer taps, folks will say, we had the inspector out here, but it was actually the health department inspector and not a PWSA inspector. So like Jordan had mentioned, make sure if you have, especially a sanitary tap, but also water tap and terminations, make sure you're calling for inspections. And that is the applicant's responsibility. Even though we issue the permit, we just have it sitting in the system until you call to schedule those taps. Just something I wanted to point out, like after your permit's issued, where do you find the tap-in plans? Because they don't automatically send to you. So it'll be in so it's actually step 13, not step 12. It'll just say approved tap-in plans. And this is where we've uploaded the signed tap-in plans. And you can go in and download those at any time. And that's the set that our operations team is going to have when they go out in the field. If anything that you have is different out in the field than what's on those plans, they're going to be calling me or Jordan or Rob from the engineering team to ask why. So if you're out in the field and something like site conditions are different than, what was predicted, just give us a call, let us know that something might be changing, and we'll work with you to get that done quickly. And last thing I want to mention, you will be assigned a reviewer throughout the process. So after the initial review, then we come in and assign your specific reviewer. And you can talk with them at any time throughout the process. And that's through this discussion link. You can start a new discussion, and our engineers love it. And you'll see Rob sending you messages through this all the time. So keep an eye out for that and make sure to respond. And sometimes he'll ask, you to change something in the initial application, and he'll do that through this discussion. So keep an eye out for that. And also CityGrows is a national company, and they, specialize in permitting software for governments, and it's a low-cost solution that was just like out of the box, easy to set up, which is why we were able to get it together so quickly. So they have a bunch of tutorials on their website if you need to learn more about how things work. Of course, they'll be more general and not specific to our permits, but they are helpful when you're trying to figure something out. Yeah, that's it. Do you have any questions on the CityGrows process? So we have CityGrows linked pretty much everywhere on our website. So if you are confused on where to go and whatnot, it's easy to find, but I would definitely suggest like bookmarking it and having it on your desktop if you're going to be accessing it often. Anybody brave enough?
This is Paul from the URA. I have a question. So we have, we own a lot of lots and, that one time had houses, and you talked about like, so what was the flow previously? As you compare like previous to existing. So, at one time there were houses there. I mean, this might have been 20, 40 years ago, but is it considered just an empty lot at this point, or is it considered that it was once there was a residential flow there?
That's a great question. So as long as the lot lines don't change, and you're just putting back a single family house, you are allotted 400 gallons per day flow for that lot. So we typically let those types of projects go through the residential permitting process. Again, as long as it's a single family home. But if those lots were consolidated at some point and you're subdividing again, that does trigger the DEP process. So that's why we would ask it to go through the development permit process. And that can be a little confusing. You might not know before you come into us, if it has any flow allotted to it. So best to do a pre-development meeting and talk through those if you have multiple houses going in at the same time or something like that.
Yeah, I guess the other question would be, so say we're going into a city block, and we are, planning in a short amount of time to build, say, several, more than 2 houses on the street. Is that then going to trigger the DEP, or are those all considered separate projects? I mean, there would be, say there's no subdivision. I understand subdivision or consolidation, and multi-unit, but is that a multi-unit development, or is that just a series of single developments?
Typically, it's a series of single developments. Again, depends on the circumstances, but if it's an existing lot that, hasn't changed, typically we'll let that go through residential.
And then I do have one question that I can't remember the answer to. This is, so when we get the, I guess when we do the single family, we still have to inspect the line.
Yes,
right?
definitely.
And then what, like, how good is that inspection for? Like is, is there like a 6-month, 1 year, 2-year type of limit to when we have to re-inspect?
No, you shouldn't. I mean, that inspection will be, just for your taps. So like the actual physical connection to our pipe. So you should make that connection and then backfill and, cover the street again. So I don't think you'd be going we'd be going back out and inspecting. But
So
you
with
have,
those, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, you have to have, like, especially with the water tap, you have to have your meter installed before you make the tap or at the same time. So we can set up your billing account, because you will start getting a bill at that point. You can't make a tap and, not have a bill. So.
Right. So another question is, so I guess when we're in the planning phase, do we need to do that sewer inspection, or is it more closer to construction?
Are you referring to the CCTV?
Yeah.
It's probably best to do it when you're, planning your tap-in plans or designing your tap-in plans. So the depths and like locations and the condition and the type of pipe and whatnot. We'll give you as much information as we have, but it's not always accurate. So it's best to like know what you're getting into, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
But we definitely require them before we approve the tap-in plans. So.
Okay, because I mean, we have some we're moving through, planning approval. We haven't done that yet, so I don't know if that becomes like a major hiccup that precludes even doing the plan. I mean, but.
Yeah, and I mean, we do sort of suggest the sewage facilities planning module. You could do tap-in plans and the sewage module at the same time. Like, we'll take a look at both. But we do suggest you start it first because it takes so long. And yeah, I mean, the DEP has never denied us a development. It's just, we have to go through that process because we're under consent decree and, different regulations, so.
Okay, yeah, we've navigated through these in the past. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul.
Hi, this is I have a question. I did an agreement for Bobby White vacation, and I don't know if I have to do other properties dedication because we have more like 14 properties. So do I have to do like the Bobby White vacation, like easement agreement, or just this is for the last one?
Sorry, you're breaking up just a little bit, so I didn't quite catch all of that. So I heard that you have 14 properties. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I will repeat now. My voice is clear, Julie?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit better. Try again.
Yeah, I have problem with Wi-Fi. Okay, I did easement agreement for last vacation. I don't know. Jordan asked me about the. So I have more dedication, like 14 properties to the city. Do I have do this easement agreement or no? This is just for vacation.
Brian, did you want to take that one? Did you get it?
Yeah, so it's on.
Easement agreement for a street vacation.
Yeah, so it's on a case-by-case basis. Typically, that process is initiated by you, where you send in a plan showing where the street vacation is occurring, and we'll have someone from our engineering staff review what infrastructure we have in the vacation. If there is infrastructure and it's being impacted by the vacation, we will ask for an easement agreement, and that initiates that process. But it's always a case-by-case basis where we receive your plans, we review them, and then we'll take the next steps if easement or relocation or even abandonment is preferred. But that won't be determined until you submit that to us.
So that's, I understood this is not in general requirements.
I might have missed that one as well.
Yeah, I lost
I think where she's.
All right.
This is Paul from URA. I know what she's asking. It's the division between what DOMI and PWSA, and maybe understanding who's doing which part, I think is what her question is. So that I guess the trigger on these things goes out to all the utilities, and then you work, the utilities have worked through what their requirements are in terms of easements, access, and all that, and then but you have to complete all that before DOMI's going to approve it, I guess, right? I think that's where
correct.
the gist of this thing goes.
Yeah, and DOMI recently started requiring that we provide an easement draft as well. So essentially you can't complete the easement until you own the property, which doesn't happen until the city approves the street vacation, but they won't approve the street vacation until we approve. So
I mean, one of those circular approvals.
so it's a catch-22. So we just do like a draft agreement that shows, okay, once you own that property, we'll, sign off on it and get this easement. So,
Yeah, the sewer planning module suffers the same fate of that circular. Everybody kind of has to figure out what everybody else is doing and approving. That's been my experience.
yeah, and a lot of times people just see like a paper street behind their house or, around their development and think it's going to be an easy process to vacate it, but we do have a lot of facilities in those paper streets. I would say more than most other utilities, which is probably why there was a street to begin with. So we do see it more often than not that there's, a sewer line that runs through there or a water line. So. I feel like something came up in the chat. Oh, someone was just dropping off. So yeah, I just want to end with, Jordan and I are here to help everybody through the development process, and not just the development process, through any of the permits that come up. Any issues in the field that you may run into, or if you're a business owner, if you're experiencing, leaks on your line, or you're not getting enough water pressure, you need to upsize your meter or something like that. We're here to help with those issues. So definitely reach out to us. We're going to send out this presentation and probably the recording directly to your email after this. So you'll have our contact info. And yeah, so our next session is 2 weeks from now, June 8th. We're going to do a miscellaneous services session. So we do provide a lot of services and have requirements that kind of don't fall neatly into any category. So that's what the session 2 weeks from now is going to be. We talk about backflow, dye testing, leaks detection, conservation, maybe some lead info. So if you're interested in joining that, you could sign up on the website and we'll send out the invite shortly. Jordan, anything you wanted to end with?
No, I just thank everyone for their participation. We enjoy having these and educating everyone. Like Julie said, reach out if you have any questions. We prefer having those meeting and that interaction with everyone. If there aren't any questions, thanks for joining, and we'll follow up in email. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.